Agenda, it will list a date. There's a little chart in there that says notice of proposed rulemaking. Hi there, welcome back to Visa Vibes, where we talk about everything going on in business immigration these days. I'm Emily Newman, managing partner of Reddy Newman Brown PC.
And I'm Stephen Brown. I'm a partner at Reddy Newman Brown PC. And today we're going to talk about the spring 2025 regulatory agenda. Yes, Emily, listeners, we're talking the spring agenda, just in time for football season.
Exactly. I mean, football season just started, so when you think of football, you think of spring for sure.
Yeah, I definitely think DHS and all the other agencies could get a little bit of a delay of game penalty here, but let's talk about spring, Emily.
All right. So first, what the heck is the regulatory agenda?
Yeah, so, twice a year, government agencies and all the sub-agencies get together and they publish what is called the Unified Regulatory Agenda. And think about this as a to-do list, a wish list of things they might want to do through the regulatory process. And not always, comes to fruition, but it's our to-do list.
All right. And yeah, just because something's on the list doesn't really mean it's actually going to become a regulation. We've seen this so many times where it's on the list for a very long time. Maybe they even propose a regulation and then it just goes nowhere. So just because it's on the list doesn't mean it's actually going to be happening. And I also wanted to just kind of go over what the regulatory process looks like from the point of something appearing on this list. Before anything happens, it has to be published in the Federal Register, what the actual regulation they're proposing is. And before they can even do that, it has to be given to the OMB, Office of Management and Budget, to get their blessing on it. So once it's actually published in the Federal Register, again, it's not final. It's just a proposal. Here's what we want to do. Let us know your thoughts. It's called notice and comment. So they usually will give a 60-day period for people to comment on it. And then they take back all of those comments and sometimes decide to actually issue a final regulation. That also has to go through the OMB first. And then once they publish a final regulation, usually it will take effect 60 days from the date of publishing. So it's a very long process. Again, just being on the agenda really doesn't mean anything, but it does give us some sense of what the administration's kind of priorities are.
Yeah, that's exactly how to look at it, Emily. I mean, some of these will never see the light of day. We've seen, like you said, we've seen that before where they say we want to do this, and it just never goes anywhere for whatever reason. Maybe it can't get the OMB blessing, or maybe it can't get through certain hurdles that they have to go through. But it is kind of a nice insight into what the administration is thinking. And to your point, I mean, I always tell people that just because it's on there, even once they publish a proposal, for most regulations, we're talking about a 6 to 8 month process to go through all this, plus whatever follows.
All right. And then in terms of other timelines, so every time that a proposal is mentioned in this agenda, it will list a date. There's a little chart in there that says notice of proposed rulemaking, NPRM, expected by such and such month and year. And so, for example, it'll say NPRM November 2025. Does that mean we're actually going to see a regulation in November 2025?
No, this is very, very rough. It's like saying USCIS will take 3 months, and it could really mean, 3 months, 3 years, somewhere in between. I'll give you a good example, Emily. I was, looking at the Visa bond issue that came in the one big, beautiful bill, and I was talking to someone, and, we just got the spring agenda within the last couple of weeks. Well, it says July 2025. We're obviously past that. So it is just a placeholder. You can't hold them to that. Another good example was potentially putting premium processing for I-539s and I-765s, and it set a certain date, and everybody's like, okay, like, can we do anything to kind of push that hurdle? No, it's just a place marker of when they anticipate being able to get to it.
So yeah, definitely no guarantees there. There's no guarantee that they're even going to move forward with a proposed regulation or a final regulation.
No, and it isn't anything until it hits that Federal Register notification, and administrative priorities can change all the time. They could, we see in this administration, what happens Monday might not be the same as Friday, and so they could change their mind at any point.
All right, so let's dive into what big five kind of things are on the regulatory agenda dealing with employment-based immigration. Caveat here, when we get these agendas, the information they provide is quite limited. So we don't know exactly what's in any of these until they actually publish.
Yeah, it's always funny, the online regulatory agenda gives this abstract. It's kind of a paragraph long, like, this is what we're hoping to do kind of thing, but it's very vague. It's not anything actionable. And I can't tell you, I mean, how many times we get these and somebody says, what does this regulation mean? What is it going to do? I don't know anything more than you do.
Yeah, so we're going to give our best guess as what we think they might be doing. So one of the big ones is a plan to update employment-based immigrant petitions in the first, second, and third preference categories. So this is EB1, EB2, EB3, which really have not been touched during previous administrations at all. I can't remember the last time we've had a regulation, probably 2017.
Yeah, I think so. I
Um,
mean, we've had policy, but not really a regulation. And so, to your point, we're talking about our extraordinary ability workers, our outstanding researchers, our multinational NIWs, and then, of course, the traditional perm-based EB2 and EB3 cases that this is looking to hit on.
So this is pitched as modernization and integrity update, meaning extreme vetting update in my mind. DHS wants to define what counts as a bona fide job offer. So we've seen over the years in a lot of perm-based EB2 and EB3 I-140 RFEs or requests for evidence, they want documentation that the job that the individual is being sponsored for the green card is actually a bona fide job offer. Although there's not really anything in the regulations that defines that, and
What
there's nothing
statute?
that gives them the authority to do that, because that's kind of more Department of Labor side. But so now they're going to potentially provide that. So we're looking at vetting the job offer to make sure it's legitimate, which I get.
Yeah, but it's kind of weird, Emily, because the idea is the future job offer, right? When the individual is given the green card, what are they going to do? And I mean, I can't tell you, you probably couldn't tell people what I'm doing next week, let alone 60 years from
Right.
now with some of these backlogs. So we've seen these before, kind of randomly. We've got, we've seen some strategies, but we'll see what they have to say.
All right, next up, new potential site visit authority. So I don't think I've ever seen a site visit on an I-140 petition before. Now, at least not from FDNS. We do see sometimes some investigative things happening before people are interviewed for their green card and more related to the 485. But I think they plan on expanding FDNS to I-140s.
Which again is a little bit weird because again, we're talking about a future job offer. We could be talking about someone who's not in the United States. We could be talking about a employee that's at another entity that's coming to your company. So it's kind of weird to think about, for H-1B, it kind of makes sense. You employ me, they do a site visit, they say we want to talk about, the employment of Stephen Brown. Okay, that makes sense. But for the I-140, it's kind of this future employment kind of thing. So it could be a little weird.
Yeah. All right. And then they plan on codifying existing guidance on successor in interest and employer ability to pay. So this tells me that they're taking what guidance we do have and actually putting it in the regulation. So for successor and interest, this means when a company, merges with another company during the long green card process, at what point is the new company authorized to continue the process, or do they have to start it over? Are they a successor in interest? So there's a set list of factors that they look at, but it's not in the regulations.
No, and to your point, I mean, this is kind of what makes immigration law interesting because there's some that are coming from an AAO opinion and administrative appeals office opinion from 1994 that is still relied on, or some random policy memo that's been archived and shouldn't be used, but is still used, and everybody knows it's used. But putting it into the regulatory process and defining these things might actually have some level of help because we're going to know what rules are we actually playing by.
Yeah, what's the standard here? So again, employer ability to pay will also be included in that. Right now, we know that we have to provide either a tax return or a financial statement or a letter from the chief financial officer for larger companies, but how do they actually look at those in terms of the standards? So we're expecting more of that. And then extraordinary ability, outstanding professor, researcher petitions. These are the EB1A and EB1B category. We might see clarification on what evidence is required, modernizing some of these outdated sample examples of things like not referring to microfiche
Yeah,
anymore,
yeah,
maybe.
that'd be nice. And they do specifically mention national interest waivers, the EB2 NIW, and that's been a hot area. You know, there's a court case, Danisar, who that kind of set some guidelines on this, but now we're going to maybe look at putting this into actual regulatory ideas so that way adjudicators know, that way petitioners know what's going on. And there could be some good with this bad, right? You know, obviously, you know, some of it they might tighten up, but some of it might give us more concrete left and right limits to put together better cases or know, hey, maybe your case doesn't fit.
All right, so it's kind of a housekeeping proposal in that we're cleaning up some outdated things, codifying what current practice is, but also could be substantive because we might be getting definitions for bona fide job offer extraordinary ability that can truly change how these cases are adjudicated.
Yeah, so takeaway if you're an employer or a petitioner, you know, that's doing this on your own, you know, again, I don't think this takes place today. It certainly doesn't. This is going to be months from now. We don't even have a proposal on what this could be, but this is something to keep an eye on if you're in the EB1A, EB2 NIW, or even the perm-based category spaces, because you need to watch what's going to change because we could see a complete flip on something that works today and what's working in 2026.
Yeah, it's all going to depend on how the text is written. It could either streamline things or make the evidentiary burden even heavier.
Yeah, and remember, we only have this summary. So if you go on the regulatory agenda and you read that summary, that's as much information as I have that anybody has, you know, and until Emily and I get out our crystal ball to see the future, that's all we know. And so we're gonna see, you know, to Emily's point, we'll see a here's the proposed rulemaking. It's gonna be this long document that's super detailed. They're gonna take in the comments and they'll say, here's the final. And so we'll know more when they put out that proposed rule and seeing how that's going to go.
All right, next up is EB5. We might see some regulations on that.
Yeah, so you know the Regional Center and Integrity Act of 2022 was our last big immigration statute that actually changed things. I mean, we've had things Lincoln Riley and all that, but this is the big one on benefits in 2022, and there haven't been really a lot of regulations to interpret that. You know, regulations interpret the statute, and there hasn't been from the 2022 Regional Center Integrity Act that overhauled the program, especially with regional centers. And so this is the administration's attempt to do that.
All right, so EB5 lets investors put money into a business that creates at least 10 jobs and then get a green card based on it. So this new regulation is really going to be about aligning the existing regulations with whatever reforms were in that 2022 statute.
Yeah, and it's going to be a codification exercise. There's a lot of policy out there, a lot of best practices. I'll give you an example. There was a lot of discussion last week about cryptocurrency in the EB5 investment because when you do an EB5, you got to show lawful source of funds and how you came into all the money. And some of these Bitcoin wallets don't allow a lot of tracking back to the individual, so it gets more complicated. But that is a lawful source of income. So maybe there'll be things like that and you know how the regional centers have to operate as well. So I think we'll see things kind of maybe get to where we need to be with the 2022 act.
All right, next up, biometrics is back on the table. Now, we dealt with this before during the previous Trump administration, specifically when they added a biometrics requirement to the I-539 application. This is what we use to extend or change status for spouses, H4, L2, as well as change of status to F1 and B2 and all those things. It gummed up the system when we're making everyone go for biometrics, and we eventually sued. They eventually suspended it, and then they got rid of it. But now it might be coming back.
Yeah, the abstract says they want to expand collection and use of biometrics across the entire immigration life cycle. Okay, that's a lot, and I don't know. I mean, I learned in like elementary school, your fingerprints don't change. Um, but in their view, they want to ensure that the individual applying is that individual, right? And then the fingerprints are the only way to do that. But we started seeing that right now. People who have previous arrest records, even if they weren't convicted, are getting these biometrics appointments. So I don't necessarily trust the administration that this is all about identity purposes.
Yeah, I think we're going to see again, more gumming up of the system than anything. How is that going to impact cases where premium processing
Mhm.
is available? Are we now going to be expanding this to all I-140s? A couple of weeks, months ago, we started getting biometrics notices for I-140s, and we're thinking, what on earth are they doing? Especially when the person doesn't have to be in the US to have an I-140 filed for them, and they're saying they're going to send them for biometrics.
And we had that. We had people outside the US, and it's like you have to get a biometrics appointment at, Richmond, Virginia. Well, how? Like, how am I doing that? So, they frame this as a security measure. I don't know if I believe that because we've seen them try to use this to, like you said, gum up the system, create delays. And to your point about premium, that caused the issue with the H4 EAD in 2019. They said, we always do these together because it's more efficient and we won't be able to do it in the premium time, but we'll prioritize them. Did they? No. We saw year-long deadlines because of these simple biometrics appointments. So we'll see.
All right, next one up. Of course, no regulatory agenda would be complete without something to do with H-1Bs yet again.
Yeah, we have to keep, 35-year-old programs, so everything's kind of done on memo and regulation. So DHS is proposing to reform the program again. We just did the H-1B modernization rule, so you would think we'd be there.
Yeah, isn't
Uh,
it modern enough?
but there's three things on the regulatory agenda: revising eligibility for cap exemptions, with nonprofits, more scrutiny on employers with past violations of regulatory things, and increasing oversight on third-party placements. Something the Trump administration tried to do the first go around, got sued, lost.
All right, so we're really expecting the rules to tighten even further, particularly for qualifying for cap exemptions, and then again, more enforcement.
Yeah, and especially if you're a nonprofit entity or a cap exempt entity, you want to keep an eye on this because this could reevaluate that. And then obviously with the third party placement, this was something that came up in 2018, 2019. They kept trying to tinker with the rules, even though the statute's very clear on what an employer has to be. And even though the administration tried the first go around and tried to create two types of employers and two types of evidence, whether it's direct or third party placement, the statute doesn't do that. And so I'm intrigued to see how they do that because, especially with what we see with Loper Bright, we're going to be tied more to the statute. And, we said Loper Bright's going to cut both ways. And we'll see what that does as they try to redefine some of these things with third party placement.
Yeah, and you mentioned, their attempts to do this before. It was generally through memos and
Mhm.
policy guidance and that sort of thing. So I think they're trying to do it now through regulations to make it stand up a little more in
A
court.
little better.
That if they're not following the statute, doesn't matter how good your regulation is.
No, and we could see it could be a difference in trying to write it out, or hey, we're going to put in more audits or more penalties or types of restrictions. They tried to do these shortened approval, partial denial type cases based off of the length of the purchase order, and that doesn't really jive with the statute or regulations as it stands right now. So keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think, the stated goal is to protect US workers, wages, working conditions, and all of that. But for employers, I think it ultimately is going to mean more red tape, more hassle, less flexibility.
Yeah, and you and I always talk like, well, we're good with cracking down on the bad actors, right? People that abuse the system, people who don't follow the rules, like that hurts everybody. So we'll see what these rules have to say, but it tends to be historically with this administration, they take a chainsaw when a scalpel would do.
Yeah. So employers definitely keep an eye on this and be ready to comment once we actually have the proposal.
Yeah, so Emily, this last one, we've seen this in the news and everybody's been waiting for it. Now we see it in the noted, in the regulatory agenda.
Yes, weighted H-1B selection process. So we don't have any details, but based on what the Trump administration tried to do previously, we would expect that the H-1B lottery is no longer going to be a random lottery and instead would be based on wage offer or wage level offer.
Yeah,
Higher wages get the visas.
I kind of the best way to look at this that I call it is kind of the power rankings. Everybody will do whatever the process is going to be, which I'm curious on because we can have to submit LCAs or what, but they'll run a lottery for all the level 4 wages, and if there's any left over, they'll go to level 3 wages, and then level 2, level 1, so on. And instead of everybody kind of having this randomization, this would be weighted for the higher categories.
Yeah, so the idea is to favor employers that are paying those higher wages. DHS will likely keep the current advanced degree exception or the master's cap and that beneficiary centric approach to the lottery process to avoid those duplicate registrations. They'll probably keep all of that. But what do we think is going to happen?
Look, I want to clarify because I know this is a touchy subject. I'm all for people getting paid higher, the higher wages, but this is really, I think, an issue for Congress. The Immigration and Nationality Act is very clear that H-1Bs have to be kind of issued in the order in which they're received. And, that was okay when there wasn't extreme demand that was over demanding of the program. And so they created the H-1B lottery. I think that's a fair interpretation of order in which they're received when it's impossible to do it that way. There would be some that would argue the lottery even goes against the statute, but I think this power ranking does. And we saw there was a lawsuit on this the first Trump administration. It mentioned the INA and how it's very clear. Now that case ended up getting in against the rule, going against the rule because the acting USCIS director wasn't lawfully appointed, or DHS director Chad Wolf wasn't lawfully appointed, and so that's an easy kick for the judges because so many other judges agreed. You just take the same opinion, so we didn't get to the merits. So we're doing it again.
Yeah, so you can definitely expect this is going to end up in court if they move forward with this. Employers, that offer lower wages. There are startups, there are nonprofits,
Yep.
there are companies in more rural areas where the wages are quite different than they are, who might be losing out on talent that they need, as I would expect they're going to try to fight this.
Yeah, and so there'll definitely be some safeguards because if they go about wage level, obviously, a wage level 4 in, it's going to be lower and account for the area if it's, let's say, the hill country of Texas versus Los Angeles. But we still, to your point, startups and, more nonprofits and smaller companies that just maybe they can't get to that level 3, level 4, but still meet prevailing wage for what's going through the DOL analysis.
Yeah, and I still have a problem with how are you going to actually enforce this? Because whenever you're filing this H-1B petition, submitting the lottery, it's all looking forward. 6 months from now, we want to hire this person and we are going to offer them X amount of dollars for their wage. What's stopping a bad actor employer from saying, yeah, I'm going to offer him $400,000 a year? They get selected in the lottery because they're one of the highest wages. They file, they get the petition approved, and then the company, who's going to check if they're actually going to pay the $400,000, or what's stopping the employee from immediately transferring to a different company?
Yeah, or, business needs might change. I mean, how many, we talk about during COVID, how many amendments did people have to file? I mean, statistically, because businesses were slow. I mean, it'd be interesting to see how they put in the guardrails to ensure manipulation isn't happening here. But again, the INA doesn't contemplate this, so
Right.
it'll be very intriguing to see because again, I think the lottery itself is a reasonable interpretation of first in, first out. We've talked about this before. They would get 100,000 petitions on the first day to accept these. You can't do it that way.
Mm. All right. So, with all of these, again, we are dealing with just little one paragraph summaries on the regulatory agenda website. So, there's a lot that we really don't know yet.
Yeah, I liken this to reading the back of the DVD. It tells you kind of a little bit about what it's about, but if you told me, well, what happens during this scene, I couldn't tell you. We're gonna have to wait and watch the movie.
Man, you still get a DVD box?
And, every once in a while, the kids see something.
Please. Like, it's all streaming now.
Yeah, no, but we've still got some DVD players in case the internet goes out.
All right. So people are, of course, asking us, what's going to be in the rule? Do you know exactly what's in the rule? And no, we don't. There's no way to know until it's actually published. You have to read it to know what's in it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, and occasionally we'll hear bits and pieces. Somebody heard from somebody who heard from somebody who was in a meeting with somebody about maybe they're talking about this, but it's like four levels of hearsay, and we're just kind of guessing, and that's what makes this useful and frustrating. It's useful in that we kind of have an idea and okay, we know, and we're going to keep an eye out for these rules, and we kind of have it on our radar. But at the same time, companies want to know, individuals want to know, and they're looking to attorneys that are like, "Hey, you guys know what's going on, right? Like, how is this going to impact it?" No clue.
And even once the rule is out, it's still not final. So it's just all of this is these are things that are eventually going to be proposed. Once the proposal's out, it doesn't change anything. We still have to go through those comments and then come up with a final rule and then decide what the final rule is going to be and are we going to actually publish it? And only once that is published does it actually change anything.
Yeah, I go back to my movie example. Think about it. They've said we're going to start filming this movie, and then okay, now we know we're going to film this movie. We don't know what it's gonna, what okay, kind of have a title and maybe a little bit about it, and then later on we're gonna get the preview, and then we'll get the full movie, after they're done editing everything. So it's the summary, proposed rule, final rule, and we're at step like half right now.
Yeah, so we're just kind of speculating right now. It's definitely good to be prepared for these things, but certainty just isn't possible.
Well, we're in Trump 2.0. We've been waiting for this regulatory agenda, Emily. I mean, we've checked it weekly, daily, keeping my Bloomberg alerts on, and um, we see kind of what things are, but what's not there that you and I expected.
Yeah, one good thing, there is nothing in there about a proposal to eliminate H4 EAD, which was certainly there during previous Trump
Like
administrations.
every regulatory agenda.
Yeah.
And it never became a proposal. And that's a good example, Emily. What we talked about is that the first Trump administration had it on like every unified agenda. So we saw it 8 times, and we're like, gosh, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And never even saw a proposal. There were hurdles they couldn't get past. But that doesn't mean everything's safe, right? I mean, I know they defended it at SCOTUS, saying, hey, we have the authority to do this. It's not on the regulatory agenda. That doesn't mean it won't be on the fall agenda.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly, as you said, there's 8 agendas per president. So we have lots of opportunity. We're very early on. But there was also a Biden era proposal that was on his agenda previously that was called Improving the Regulations Governing the Adjustment of Status to Lawful Permanent Residents and Related Immigration Benefits. It was there and now it's not. It was never actually proposed, didn't move forward. We think it would have potentially made adjustment of status more efficient and streamlined, which would help long processing times that we're dealing with. It was also talking about using the filing chart for Child Status Protection Act, putting that in the regulation. Never happened, which is why the Trump administration was able to undo that
Yeah.
recently.
Yeah, and that's, unfortunately not there. To your point, I mean, the CISPA one is a big one that, is a policy, and then they flipped it back off because when we do immigration via executive policy, you could just do that. Just take a pen, and that's different from regulation, where it has to go through the regulatory process, which is different from statute, which has to go through Congress. I mean, I don't know how many times that I saw during either Biden or Trump, somebody said, "Well, so and so can just do this with a swipe of a pen." It's not always true. Policies, yes. Regulations, no. And there is defined processes, and so we're gonna keep an eye on this. But Emily, what do we what happens now? Where people are gonna listen to this and think, okay, what do I do?
Yeah, so I would say first just stay tuned. If you're an employer, if you're a university, if you're an individual immigrant, you're a student, we definitely want to stay tuned, monitor updates. If you are connected to the American Immigration Lawyers Association or Society for Human Resource Management, NAFSA, they generally are very good about publishing alerts and putting together comments and that sort of thing. So just keep watching that.
Yeah, don't underestimate the importance of public comments. When these rules come out, there will be a comment period, and agencies have to read them, have to respond to them. And strong, well supported comments can help change the final rule or potentially help with potential litigation as well.
Yeah, and we know that they do read these comments. Back when the STEM OPT extension regulation had to be redone because the rule was vacated at one point, we published a template comment for students to submit on my old blog, immigrationgirl.com. And in the actual final regulation, when they published it, they quoted language that came directly out of our comment. So we know that they received that comment multiple times, and it did inform their decision making and how they were going to finalize that regulation.
Yeah, and I think, the other thing to think about is collaboration. The community is pretty large that are interested in these topics, but I wouldn't write a comment on my own. I'd talk with you, I'd talk with our attorneys, I'd talk with, other attorneys that I know to shape kind of my how to frame it because there might be something I'm missing. So work with industry associations, business coalitions, potentially immigration attorney. We'll put stuff out there, but also tell your story and how this rule would impact you as well. But working together can kind of help make a stronger comment.
Yeah, and definitely don't wait till the last day to submit it. You want to draft it early, revise it, submit it with time to spare, and also realize that it's not the quantity of comments, it's the quality
Mhm.
of them. So having, 1,000 friends submitting the same comment that just says, we don't like this,
Oh,
is not going to be enough. Like we saw this during prior administrations going through the regulatory process. All these comments are public,
mhm.
and people comment on these like they're commenting on a Facebook
Oh,
post.
it's like awful. I mean, some of it's like I don't like people.
Yeah.
And that we'll see like they'll say like we received numerous comments that said get rid of this. And they'll respond one time because it's not unique. They can't just do that. So again, tailor it, address it, but don't put some thought into it. Just don't say, don't do this because it's bad.
Yeah, and these rules have the potential to really reshape the immigration landscape for years to come. So you can either influence them now or deal with them later.
Yeah, when this is time to collaborate, go back to the football analogy here. You can't complain about the playbook if you don't show up to practice and communicate.
Perfect analogy. So that's it with the spring agenda. Better late than never.
Yeah, so we're gonna keep tracking everything. Make sure you stay tuned to Visa Vibes and Emily and I on social media as well. We're very active, especially with these breaking news things, and we'll make sure something gets posted as we see it.
All right. Thanks for joining.